Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your hosts, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense. Welcome back into the Gambino podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino, and I'm here with the other host, Joe LaVacca. You can find us on Instagram at Joe Gambino DBT for myself, and for LaVacca there at Strength and Motion _PC. You find this podcast on Instagram, Beyond Pain Podcast, and on YouTube, Cups of Joe _PT. You're back, Joe. Welcome back to the show.
Welcome back, man. You're officially back from vacation.
I am.
I'm looking forward to vacations ahead.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, we're almost halfway done with summer by the time this one rolls out. So it's flying, dude.
Yes, yeah. See here, I don't feel as stressed about July or August because warm weather will stick around mostly through November and even into December. So we got a longer runway here in North Carolina than I did when I was, in New York. Obviously. So I know the clock can definitely take for you.
Exactly. Yeah, does the Gambino clan have any other trips coming up?
We are talking about New York at some point. It keeps getting pushed back. I am the godfather to the Chiarelli's kids. They're youngest, so they're supposed to be baptism. That's what was going to bring back to New York originally. I don't know when that's going to happen now, but we are thinking about like a Labor Day-ish, maybe, depending on how things play out.
Okay, all right.
The other trip for us.
All right. Well, maybe I'll have to bring my gear into the city. We can do like a in-person.
Oh.
Maybe we line up
in-person pod and lift. Maybe we just lift and pod at the same time.
Oh,
there we go.
I've seen that a couple of times now, and it seems to go really well. Chatting in between your sets, and you just crush something, and then we start chatting again. And yeah, I like that. The guests we would bring on, if we were going to bring a guest, would have to obviously be a lot weaker than us. So we couldn't be lifted on our own podcast. So we'd have to be very strategic in who we select.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, all right. Well, I'll have to think about that. Who's in here? Okay. Oh man, I mean, here you have a question for me today.
Yes,
so why don't we dive into it?
So I have a few clients this week and next week and probably towards the end of August who have been planning for returns to or competition of like a major race. So I have one client going for an Ironman. He's done them before. He's been very successful. I have another client returning to, and what is her distance? I don't think it's a half. I think the Olympic distance with the Ironman is the shorter one. There's a sprint, there's an Olympic, and then there's the half and the full. So I think she's going to try to go for her first either sprint Ironman or Olympic Ironman. And then I have one or two people looking forward to returning to some pretty long bike rides or, like these 10K, 20K events. Now, all of them obviously have been training with me for a while. We know them from previous injuries. So my question to you is, what would you do with these clients as they got closer and closer to their big race events? Is there a certain strategy or system of thinking that you use? And yeah, I'll just kind of let you take the floor there and you can run with it wherever you like.
Yeah, so I think it depends on goal. Obviously like an Ironman or it's ultras and there's a race, and especially if they're looking to set, hey, I like to run the race well and this time, right? Those are going to be looked at differently than like this person who just wants to be able to do like a 20-mile bike. I don't know if they're doing like a race, they're trying to actually be in a race, or it's just like one of those like 20-mile bike tour through, New York or whatever area, right? So I look at those very, very differently. If it was somebody who is just doing a bike tour or just going to do like a run on their own, and that's what they're trying to get back to, it's really not going to change how I'm programming. Running my bike, I can just kind of fit in maybe that week, just volume a little bit. You're not, or rather, you're not going to push that hard. It's a deload week for them that week, and they can go enjoy their bike ride and whatnot. It's a larger change this way. You're mentioning, and I probably have them do some rides, right, to build them up and make sure that if they haven't done 20 miles in a while, have you try 5, have you try 10, can we try 15, and see how that stuff goes as you're building up. For somebody doing a race, then things are going to change. So I find out from them when they're trying to peak as far as they're like. I always want to know when their training starts to pick up. So they're usually 12, 16 week, whatever time frame that they're choosing to really pick up their volume and the race. And during that period of time, volume has to significantly drop from a strength training perspective. So sessions will get shorter. There'll be main lifts, things to kind of help open up mobility to keep them feeling good, and that's really it, right? It's just a matter of keeping them moving well and feeling good in between their training, because obviously at that point the inputs from a workout or fitness or goal perspective has to be specific to what they're trying to accomplish. If someone wants to go out and do that Ironman, they're like, hey man, I want to crush this and I want to hit my best time ever, right? Like, you need to let them have that time to create those adaptations, and that's not the time to also create strength adaptations. You don't want to take them out of the gym completely, but you need to manage, modify it. And training at that point is like, how can we keep feeling good? How can we keep your mood pattern well as you're doing this more sports specific training? And that's really how I look at it overall, as like a high level overview.
Yeah, I think what you said there resonated with me. For a lot of people, peaking, right? That was a word we've heard thrown around. How would you explain peaking to clients or maybe to some healthcare providers who are listening, just so they get an understanding of organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so peaking is kind of you're going through this particular training over whatever period of time, so that at the time of the race or the event that you're doing, you are hitting your peak of your performance at that point, right? So this way, when you hit the race, you've done all this training that has led up to a certain point where you're going to be running your fastest time, you're going to have your best endurance, and then anything after that, right, there's going to be kind of like a drop off because you've peaked, you've hit, you've kind of crushed your nervous system to a perspective, and then you'll have some recovery as you're in between events. Same thing if it was like powerlifting or Olympic lifting. You go through this training cycle, and by the time you hit your event, you are going to be, that's when you're testing your 1RMs, right? Like, you're trying to peak and hit that higher level performance. And then you kind of reset, you do some more general prep work and kind of cool off. And then you just kind of cycles, right? It's like until the next event, so to speak. So that's how I would kind of describe how peaking in a sense.
Yeah, I like the other thing you said too, almost the goals, right? So keeping the end in mind. And if I have a client that I've been training and they give me enough heads up, because sometimes they just genuinely forget, and they're like, "Oh, hey, I forgot. I have an Ironman this weekend," and I'm like, "Ooh, probably not a good thing that you did your EMOM AMRAP workout like the day before." But assuming they give us enough leeway, programming out or starting backwards, I've always found is helpful. Like, I know, like, that week, whatever programming you're on, whether it's deadlifting or squatting or benching, maybe the week before, maybe 2 weeks before, depending on the person and their schedule, I'm going to try to keep that intensity up, right? So I want them to still sort of lift a little bit heavy, but maybe I switch them to more mid-range movements. So maybe it's more box squats instead of full rep squats, so they can, kind of stay fresh, to your point. Maybe it's some like good morning pulls from the rack, just so, again, so they're keep priming their nervous system for these outputs, but it's not taxing them from a really heavy recovery standpoint. And the other thing I found kind of helpful is, instead of torching them with some, finishers that are going to leave them huffing and puffing, they're already getting a lot of that during the week. So these isometrics, I find that people typically, like a lot more towards the end of their sessions. Definitely the mobility work. So I've gone there with people too. So that's kind of helpful to hear. Is there ever a time or when you're working with a client where they say something like, "Hey, I want to do this Ironman," or "I want to do this, this bike race," and it's the beginning of September, and I'll share a story with my client who's been working super hard, pushing it. She's doing so awesome, and she wants to do this 70-mile race by like September or so. So working backwards from where she's at now, she's at about 25 miles. So it would be about a 9-mile, distance jump per week to
Mhm.
even kind of get her remotely in the ballpark for like a 70-mile race. So yeah, it didn't seem too aggressive for me. Maybe we're just outside those like little 10% jumps. But in your mind, when you're trying to squeeze something in for a client, do you have a rule like of, hey, I don't want to jump their volume more than 10% a week. I don't want to do it more than 20%. Is there a little like Joe Gambino system of approach or thought process? Or again, is it really probably pretty contextual at that point?
Yeah, it's pretty contextual. I think it's based on the person's symptoms ready. I mean, if they're running 25 miles and there's not really pain when they're running, and you just guys are working on other things, then you don't really the 10% rule probably doesn't really fully apply, right? Like the 10% rule in rehab, right, is to make sure that you're not flaring up and doing too much too fast. So this way you can figure out when you hit that point of like, this is your tissue tolerance, and now we can train that level, right? If this person is 25 miles and doing pretty well, maybe, I mean, sure, maybe a 9-mile like jump every single week for 2 months could give them some pain. But this is what the conversation I have with these people is it's the risk reward
Right.
cycle here, right? Like you really want to do this, and that's perfectly fine, but you probably should expect that if we're pushing the needle here to get you to this race, something might pop up. And as long as you're okay with that, and we're going to kind of go through it, and really our goal for PT right now is we're going to put you in, like, we're going to manage symptoms, right? How can we manage symptoms, bring them down, allow you to continue to go to your race if this is something really important to you. There are always going to be races in the future. So if you feel right now with where you are that doing this race is important and you want to go do it, then fine by me. Let's do what we can, as long as things aren't really hitting the fan and your pain getting so bad where you're not even going to be able to do the race anyway. Then obviously then you have that conversation. And maybe the expectations for this person is, this year maybe it's like you just want to get through this one, right? You're not going to be aiming from a performance perspective. Like even if you're not running 50 miles in your training, right? Like you get yourself as prepared as possible. Maybe you run most of it and walk some, but at least you get it done. And then next year when race comes around, you're aiming for the higher level performance if that's the goal, right? Like you want to get your mile time down or do this under a certain time. So again, it depends on the person's goals and what they want. So in that case, I say, hey, let's get you there. You may need to taper your expectations because this probably isn't going to be like your best performing run that you've ever had, because you only have 2 months to get prepared. Your knee's not in a good. I mean, 2 months is really not that bad of a time to prepare for a race.
Yeah.
But if they're, if they haven't done that in a while and you're worried about flare-ups and stuff like that, then there has to be some room to kind of back off volume and stuff like that to make sure that she can get to that race without pissing off whatever body part it is by the time she gets there.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about all these like little rules with progression training. With weight training, I'm typically guiding people on like, hey, let's try to go up like 2% a week, maybe max 5% on some of your weights and reps or sets. For running, we've heard like this 10% rule for a really, really long time. And actually, I don't know if you saw it, but last week there was a study that came out, I think about 5,000 runners. And what the biggest advice, or what one of the biggest advice pieces from that article seemed to be, was to not have runners jump more than 10% of their longest run over the last 30 days when it comes to their training. So in each individual training cycle, you look back 30 days. Hey, what was your highest run? All right, cool. We don't want to jump more than 10% of that in any given training session. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But then with my client now, the one that I mentioned, is that the same for biking? Is that 10% rule same for biking? I mean, sometimes you could be, again, coasting through, some of your straights, maybe get some downhill and you're not pedaling, you're not working, the bike's doing a lot of that work for you. So I think that's where the expectation factor really comes in, that you pointed out, that look, according to the math here, this is what we would have to do to kind of jump you up week to week at a even remotely safe clip. However, this is if a perfect cycle of events happens, right? Like you're sleeping regularly, you don't feel overtrained, you are eating the right, amount of food, nothing happened with your kids, you didn't miss a workout session, the list goes on and on. So I think the shorter the time frame, setting expectations is so important. But then we're also really hedging our bets that, hey, for these next 8 weeks or however many weeks, things have to go perfectly. And then maybe if they're not, well, then maybe we got to think about maybe pulling out of this race, or
Mhm.
what's the next one. And to share one other story, I have another client who is, sort of looking forward to that Ironman, that shorter distance one, hasn't been as consistent with training. So now my concern with like a message I get today is, hey, Joe, I'm going to go real heavy into my tri training now. I got to fit it all in. I'm going to be starting to do 2-a-days. And she hasn't really been consistent. So I messaged her today. I haven't heard back from her. Is that, is this the best path forward for you? Is this the safest path forward for you? What's the next race? What else can we look forward to? Because I know how hard she's worked to get out of pain. I know how much she's juggling with, her life and her family and her work. So I expect all those things to stay the same, and then to throw in suddenly 2 day a week, 2 times a day workouts just to get you to a point. I don't know if that's going to be the best fit for her. So hopefully we can kind of collaborate on that, come up with a plan, maybe think about pushing this race out a little bit. Obviously you and I can't make a decision for anyone,
Yep.
but all we can sort of do is say, reflecting back on your last 8, 10, 12 weeks of training, I don't have enough data to confidently say, hey, yeah, two-a-days are going to be perfect for you. Because I remember summer camp with football, and even doing summer camps leading up to our sleepaway camp where we started doing 2-a-days. I mean, I was completely toast, and I was doing a ton of conditioning to even get to that point. So 2-a-days for me at 16 were almost impossible, and can't even imagine as a working mom, kids, supporting all the things that you have to do in life and not being as consistent, what that could do to you. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with some ideas for that. But have you had to have that conversation with anybody or recently?
Yes. Well, actually, as recently I work with a runner who runs a bunch of. He's an ultra runner, and he had a little like hamstring hiccup. It's really no bruising, swelling. It's just a little
Yeah.
sore. It's getting better day by day. Yeah, but he has a race Sunday. He's like, it's not even worth it. I'm not gonna run it out. And I was like, and I told him to do a test run yesterday. I haven't. I don't know if he did it yet or not. I was like, I do a test run, see how it feels. If things keep getting better every day,
Right.
if you want to do the race and stuff like that, so you can. He's like, no, I'm just not going to do it. So that was an easy conversation to have with him. He was fine. He'll run his race the next time he runs. He's he's really into running those races. But I have, whenever I have these conversations with someone, they have, if they already have it booked, I say these are the two outcomes here. Here's the risk reward. I mean, obviously, if you want to do it, like go do it. But you need to understand that there are maybe some hiccups on the way and that there's some pain, and we just need to make sure that we're managing here. As long as they're okay with that, then I mean it's fine, right? As long as they're not doing more harm than good at that point, right? And they're not picking up and into a place where they can't do what they want to do, then I think that's the big thing here. So I know you all
Cool.
don't know, but
Yeah, no, I mean,
that's really where I'm
completely
at.
agree.
Mhm.
No, I completely agree. I mean, obviously, our number one job, or the way I explain my number one job to people, is to be a guide, but to be a guide that best serves you to stay safe.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about it numerous times on the podcast. We see it all the time. The thing that's going to get you to your goals is consistency. So if we blow up and now we can't run or
Mhm.
we can't train for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you name it, that's going to be the quickest way out of consistency. That's going to be the quickest way out of reestablishing your lifestyle and behaviors that you've been working towards. And then we're sort of like back, maybe stuck in that rut, or back kind of feeling hopeless, or back kind of then now dealing with provider after provider who wants to do what to us with braces and boots. And
Sure.
as we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, then who's going to start to say, well, hey, running it just isn't for you. You're not the body type, or your knee has too much arthritis in it, or your this has too much degeneration in it. And really, you just never gave yourself enough time to be successful or to even have the opportunity to actually fail. So I think that that's definitely a valuable piece. And I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, buddy.
I will share this because I was actually curious what we're talking about it, and we'll have to take this with a grain of salt because it's coming from ChatGPT with no background looking at the data here. But I was actually curious where the 10% rule came from. Do you know, Joe?
I
Or is this
believe,
typical for you as well?
the story I built up into my head was the acute chronic workload ratio studies. And I want to say they were from like Tim Gabbett and his group back in the day that suggested that whole kind of like 10% jump day to day, week to week sort of thing. But please educate me, Mr.
Yeah.
Gambino.
So according to this, it originally came in a out of the running community, 1976, called Women's Running.
Love it.
Um, yeah, and so it was pretty much just she's a doctor, and really after seeing athletes break down, they went and added more suits, so she came up with the 10% jump mileage over time, and really it seems like from this that the research is not super strong. So again, right, it was a guide, but the 12% is actually that worse than 10 is 10 would be too much for somebody, right? So I
Correct.
think there's always a little
Correct.
room for, as we were saying before, right? There's going to be room to let them go, and it all comes down. Even the practical takeaways is actually pretty good. Tracking soreness and pain for within the first 48 hours of when it happens. That's probably the bigger sign than anything, because if you do all these jumps, all of a sudden your soreness and your pain keeps ticking up and it keeps lingering and sticking around and things are feeling worse, then that's a pretty clear sign that you're overtraining that tissue. And if none of that stuff is happening, or there's some little bit of soreness, and after a couple of days of rest, you're back to baseline, you go do more runs, you kind of keep going up, then it's probably going to be fine. You're probably not going to really run into much issues. I really think it comes, it always, for me, a lot of it just comes back to listening to the body, the pain guidelines
Yeah.
we talked about 1,000 times in this podcast. And I think when we use all of these things in tandem, right, you kind of get a pretty good picture of when we need to back off a little bit, when you can push a little bit harder, when you can continue on your journey, and all those little things. So,
Yeah. I think the little extra nuance there I would add with the pain piece is just how are you feeling during your training? If you start sleeping like shit, if you start feeling like shit, if you know that you're irritable, if you know that you're lashing out at your kids or your spouse or you're calling out sick from work, you know, you don't have to have pain to have your body kind of let you know that it's not in a good place. So whether that's days off, whether that's working with a coach for programming, whether that's getting your nutrition dialed in, you name it. But I think on top of those little pain rules that we push a lot, my general sort of rule of thumb is just to ask people a generic question: how are you feeling? Do you feel any different than you normally do over the last, 2, 3, 4 months? And if you do, then maybe it's that early warning sign. Maybe it's even a precursor to pain, because we do know now, even with some of these, other studies coming out with pain and tendonitis and these systemic changes with arthritis. I mean, blood panels of people who are sick, depressed, overly anxious match a lot of the blood panels and draws that we take from people with tendinosis, tendinopathies, arthritis, things like that. So it is, I think, kind of pushing a little bit more into this whole systemic effect with people, and I think that's definitely something that we want to keep a lookout for. You muted.
I had a crying baby back there. Yeah, so I really like what you were mentioning about like having this. It's almost like your readiness check in a sense,
Yeah.
because that goes on top of everything else, right? It's how you're feeling and energy levels and all that stuff. And those are all good indicators on even just overtraining in general. Right? If we took injury out of this equation, these are the things that we're going to be tracking to make sure that, if we are going back to trying to peak, right? Like you need to track these things, because all of a sudden, if you start to see and you're getting closer to a race, and all of a sudden your times are going down and you're feeling groggier and you're feeling heavy and you're feeling irritable, right? Those are signs that you've actually probably overdid and you've already peaked, and now you're getting into that phase of overtraining, right? So you're going to back off and kind of try to come back up. So that's some of the skill of being able to kind of peak and stuff like that. So it's the same type of quality here. So even if we remove injury from the perspective and we're looking at performance only, it's the same stuff that we talk about here, right? It's just at a different level. So we're making sure that we're paying attention to all that stuff. All of these little pieces give us clues to where you are in the journey, and if you're going to hit those goals or not, or and how we can start to modify and move around them.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's what I wanted to ask you today. That's all I got to say for the moment. Mr. Gambino, anything else that you'd like to add?
Take us home.
All right. Well, Joe, love you. Good to have you back. Listeners, we love you. Thank you for joining us again on the Beyond Paid podcast. And don't forget to tune in next week for another exciting episode.